Good evening, everyone. Call the regular meeting of the Bucksport Town Council to order for Thursday, March the 28th. Obviously, this meeting is being held in person, and it can be viewed on local cable channel 1303 or on the internet by accessing the town website at bucksportmaine.gov and clicking on the Agendas and Minutes tab, then selecting the council meeting and clicking on video. Questions or comments may be submitted prior to or during the meeting by emailing slassard@bucksportmaine.gov, during the meeting by calling 469-7368, and I will take this opportunity to remind you that now would be a great time to turn your cell phones to silent or whatever, so they don't ring. Next item is roll call. George.
Councilor Mark Eastman.
Present.
Councilor Paul Goff.
Here.
Councilor Tracy Hare.
Here.
Mayor Paul Bissonnette.
Here.
Councilor Dan Ormsby.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Steve Bishop.
Here.
Councilor Ed Rankin.
Next item is presentation of any town council recognitions. There are none. Next is to consider minutes of previous meetings. We do have the minutes from the March 14th, 2024 town council meeting. I'll assume everyone's had a chance to review those.
Motion approved. Second.
All those in favor? Next is receive and review correspondence, and we have one, the Verona police call on March the 13th of 2024. Any questions? Thank you. Next is ordinances to consider or introduce, and we don't have any this evening. Next, under discussion items, we have two items. The first is Bucksport Mill landfill discussion.
Since the last meeting, the council has received a response to the letter sent by Mayor Bissonnette to the commissioner. That was distributed to the council, and it was just received yesterday afternoon, and I also distributed it to the local citizens group that was interested. I don't know if you want to discuss what was in the letter, what you might still want to know, what next steps you want to do, or how you want to proceed from here. Whether that's, she had indicated they were looking to set up a meeting with Bucksport Mill to discuss compliance and closure. If you want to meet with them before that or meet with them after they've had that, so there would be something more concrete to discuss in terms of what.
Her letter did point out that they were very willing to meet with us. Mm-hmm. So that was the biggest take back, that tool I saw moving forward on out of that. And I think it would be a good idea if we did.
I agree. I'd like to meet with them. I think I'd like to just have a sense what the letter, I don't think, did for me was, I don't have an understanding of, I certainly respect the process of enforcement discretion, but I'm not clear. We don't have a date, and this is pretty serious, what's going on up there, and I feel like it would be helpful to get in a room with them and just hear, because this wasn't like a couple of weeks extension. This was more than a month and ongoing. So I'd love to just have a discussion with them and get their sense of what, at least for them to have a sense of how serious this is. We've got some citizens now reaching out with concerns about their wells, and I think it'd be good to just have a discussion with them.
I feel like our questions would be fewer if we met with them after they met with Bucksport Mill.
I would agree.
Although I understand the timeline is an item, but
yeah.
I think we'd have more information, like Sue said.
Yeah, I disagree, just because I feel like we've had so many questions unanswered, but I'm willing to, concede to that. But that's just my thought. I feel like we've gone quite a long time. What more? I mean, they've already had discussions.
Yeah.
With.
Ask for both. There's no
Ask
reason.
for both.
There's no. Yeah.
I kind of agree with Steve, though. They're not going to be able to give us any answers without knowing any plans from them. or at least,
Yeah,
right?
but they
'Cause
hold
this-
the upper hand, right?
the state?
Yeah, I mean, what answers are AIM going to give the state? I mean, who's in control of this conversation, AIM or the state? That's all I'm.
Yeah. I would like to say the state. I truly would, but
Yeah.
nothing's been done to date. So that would tell me that really AIM has the upper hand.
Right,
Um,
and that's,
You know, I mean, that's, I hate saying it that way because it should be the state that has the upper hand, but,
yeah.
why can't we meet with them both at the same time?
I don't think that would be a good idea. I don't think that would be a good idea.
I'm just having.
The
give
who's
it-
got the upper hand, in reality, Bucksport Mill LLC has an active license for that landfill. That the license is what it is. The department has issued numerous compliance things that haven't occurred. They have now put in writing that they're moving forward with compliance and closure, which is a different discussion than the annual report that says yada, yada, yada. The question about, you know, how long does it take to set up a meeting with them is really what you're, because that's when the clock starts ticking on what they would be required to do, because the closure requirement and the compliance effort are the purview of the department. AIM doesn't get to decide what it wants to do as part of a closure plan. A closure plan is a very detailed, very involved process that includes many of the things that were discussed here at the last meeting in terms of, you know, the requirement for monitoring wells around the perimeter and a whole plan that describes the cover system and the leachate system and how that's treated, and you know, it's not a small body of work to do a landfill closure plan. It's not if you want it to be something that doesn't end up being a contaminant-ridden whatever. A closure plan has to be very detailed and very well monitored once it's, you know, inspected during construction and then monitored post-construction in order for it to be successful. When I say I don't think it's a good idea because the AIM has no license with us because we did our ordinance after they already had a license. They have not applied to the department to change that license or to do our way into the room in a discussion is if they were to apply to change something, sell it, change it, modify, that allows our ordinance to kick in because we have those rights for any change in the license. But we don't right now. Right now, they're a licensee, and the licensee in the department, there's no requirement that they allow anybody else into the room in that
right.
discussion.
I guess my concern was just that, and I get what you're saying now, that the potential for other people being impacted by their negligence now seems to be on the table. And, I mean, I'm just worried about that. And, we've heard it from so many people for so long, so. I mean, I'd be okay meeting with them after they met, but I'm a little worried about what happens when AIM presents another interested party, or the likelihood of that is pretty slim, but could we be continuing this pattern of, we got a letter like we got last time, it's going to be closed, we have an enforcement effort, but wait, maybe somebody's interested now, and could that continue?
The discussion in the commissioner's letter was that the window of opportunity for eligible entities is small because of the criteria. And on Tuesday, when we'd not yet heard from the commissioner, I emailed her to say I'm in hopes that she was out of state, but I heard from the deputy commissioner. He said that the entity that was interested in negotiations has stepped away and notified you of that. And just to check, I contacted Orrington and Winterport and Brewer, the other 3 entities that have either have a landfill or have a solid waste producer that might want to partner with this, all 3 of which said no, and one of them has put it in writing to me that they're not, which is Chris Bachman from Orrington. And I said, and if you go any further than that footprint geographically, this becomes a thinly veiled attempt to open a commercial landfill, and that's not allowed. So I think that once you get beyond this circle, it becomes a really difficult mountain for them to try and get over in terms of fitting a square peg into a round hole. But that doesn't mean that they won't try. That doesn't mean that they don't have the right to try. It means that the likelihood of success is low. But unfortunately, nothing is fast. There's nothing is fast. I was extremely encouraged to have in writing from the commissioner that their plan was foreclosure. That didn't come from an underling. That came from the commissioner herself. So, and that's different than the letter that originally went out or anything. This was the commissioner.
And I think their meeting with AIM could bring a lot more questions as well that we'd want to have them in front of us to ask.
You know, another thing about this is, and I do want to follow the process, me as one person here, as much as possible. I do want to a point, give the process the time it needs to play out. But that said, I think Councilor Bishop is right. We definitely need to have a meeting with them after. But I can also see a reason for meeting with them before as well. And the reason for that is, despite the letter and despite any number of things, here's the honest truth is this: that landfill has sat up there for over 20 years with almost no monitoring. A lot of stuff has happened up there that the DEP just simply hasn't been on top of, and that AIM has taken advantage of, for lack of a better way of describing that. So I think we just need to have our time to make sure that we're aware of that they're aware of that, and be able to say, because if we don't, then I think it creates the perception that perhaps that we're apathetic about how long a closure plan could be postponed. And I think if we just are at least saying, hey, we want to make sure that all the facts are on the table from our perspective, without,
And we may not have to have a meeting beforehand to do that. We could send off another letter and clearly state our position and goals. That could be an option if.
And specifically, we're encouraged by this, but a date certain is necessary for for AIM to be stepping to the table, because the setting that up stuff can't be. I mean,
that's a good point. If we could get that via a letter, then fine.
That would be, I would think that the definition, because the request for the closure plan was 2024 with the closure of 2026, because as I said, it's, if you start tomorrow, you might get it done by 26, but
See, that's the.
other than that, it's a process. That we negotiated a closure plan in Hamden for Pine Tree in 2007, for a closure in 2010. I know it, I was there, I lived through that one, but the whether you have a meeting in before or after or both, I think the more information you have on what AIM is presenting, that would allow the town to respond to that kind of,
And I think, I mean, they have to have a sense where we stand from our last letter, I think.
I would hope.
well,
Yeah.
Here's the other thing. Once the department puts the closure requirement on the table, that is a change to their license. The town has a way to be more part of that process than we are. Right now,
The
we're,
last time it was, we didn't have the ordinance when they, so that's, I see, yeah.
but the ordinance is in place now, and closure is an activity, a separate activity that requires review and all that kind of stuff. And so when we get there, the town can have a seat at the table according to our ordinance with that review, whether it's locally or we participate at the state level. That is a way in that we wouldn't have without the ordinance. But the ball needs to get on the court in order for that to happen, and the initial part of that is them meeting to set a timeline for them to do it.
Again, as you said, the timeline, if they could start up there tomorrow and it likely wouldn't be completed by 2026. Okay, let's acknowledge that and accept that as a reality. Then I guess we have to decide too, as we move forward, what are we comfortable with, as long as at the end result is that things are done up there the way that they should be. That there's a firm closure plan that's pretty specific, outlines what's gonna happen at the end of it, with a firm date too. And I don't think that should take till 2030 either, but I mean, if that takes us into 2027, then so be it. But I still will say that there is a school of thought that there's been plenty of time to resolve some of the issues up there as well, but we can't do anything about that now.
How do we feel about the questions from citizens that have abutting houses that are raising questions about water quality and other things? What is a reasonable and respectful course of action to acknowledge that and still continue to move forward with this as fast as we can, as far as
Yeah.
getting a plan
That's
put
kind of
together?
where I was getting at, Councillor Bishop, with meeting with them ahead of time, just bringing to their attention, we've got these potential concerns now.
Yeah.
Not potential concerns, these concerns that potentially there could be some problems. But, I mean, if you think that could be achieved,
Through a letter?
or the meeting, after the meeting with AIM, I don't think, like, two different conversations, I guess, the meeting with AIM prior to, with DEP prior to AIM, I could agree with you guys on that, but I think at some point it would be helpful, because that's my concern, we're getting more and more rain,
Yeah.
more and more every year, so I think I'd just be happy when that is covered.
Yeah, I don't know how many people have reached out to you folks. I've had 2 people reach out to me specifically about that, and my take is I just encourage them to, that's on them. If someone owns property close to it and they have a question, they need to be responsible.
So if we ask the department to do water quality testing around it,
Can you do that?
Yeah, that's
You can ask for anything you want.
Yeah.
Let's do
I mean,
that.
that'd be good
Then we
information
will
for them
get
to
it,
have
but-
with their
yeah.
Well, I
conversations with
mean,
AIM.
if
Is that,
we're aware they're doing this, but we have locally concerns that there are current impacts to water quality in properties surrounding the landfill, and that, as part of whatever they're doing, we'd like them to institute testing around it to set a baseline here to see what, where things stand now, in terms of it, because we know where the monitoring wells information is, but those that are in a area around that have wells that are not on public water, that where the water table is in that
Mm.
direction, that the town would request that water quality, baseline testing be done of those to see where they all stand, and then, I mean, this is a process, not an event.
Right.
And so we need to, if we want something, we need to ask for it. Now, if
Okay.
they say no, there's nothing that says that the town, if it chose to, couldn't test those wells and have that information
Mhm.
as part of an ongoing discussion about what's happening and not happening. So there's more than one way to do it, but,
See, I didn't know. I didn't
Yeah.
know how reasonable that would or wouldn't be on that larger scale.
well, I don't know what they would, I think that the department is certainly well aware of the town's stance on this subject and the town's concerns about the level of neglect that the site has had for, let's be honest, more than since AIM owned it. It wasn't, we've all heard the same stories about what it was before. So I think that, as part of this process of closure, that them being required to do baseline monitoring around the site isn't even unusual.
Okay.
Right, and it could be something, if a part of due diligence, if they were going to be inclined to extend out a closure plan beyond where it already has been extended. If the water around that site has been impacted, that you would think would tell the DEP, no, this needs to be resolved as soon as possible. And on the flip side of that, let's be honest, if the water hasn't been impacted, be careful what I say, because I would want to probably see multiple tests, but you see where I'm going with that. If it hasn't been impacted, then maybe there's a little bit more room in order to extend out the closure plan, but to make sure that, work with everybody
I don't know that it should be
involved.
extended, but I think it should be comprehensive
That's what
enough
I'm
to
trying to say.
assess
Yeah.
that.
I
and
don't want to extend anything.
It
You're right.
doesn't, part of that, a closure plan is an evaluation of everything that's there before you start.
How much say does the town have in a closure plan?
Well, our ordinance says that once they're gonna do something different, we have a local process that we
Yep.
can make them go through. But it actually makes more sense in a closure capacity to sort of be at the table when DEP's doing it, to
Yep.
make sure that the things that the town finds to be necessary are, and because if they don't, the town can always do its own thing, but
I think it makes sense for us to put out the water testing and request that now. Like, do that right away.
Well, that's something you do now before a closing anyway, and do
Yeah.
after a closing, because you're gonna disturb things during a closing, I'm guessing, that are, I've never done one, but, and then, so you have, but you have a baseline to go by, say, all right, these are infected now, which will help us kind of push things along maybe.
Yep.
Or, all right, they're not, but once it's closed, you do it after to make sure that nothing got disturbed, and now it's, or at least those 2 times, right? Probably
Before
more,
people
but
do this, that-
before they wipe their hands, right?
so
I think the sooner the better on testing wells.
So a time by which, and that water quality testing at the potentially impacted wells around the
You're the-
site.
You're the expert, what do you recommend?
April 15th,
What's that?
by April 15th?
A timeline by April 15th?
Well, you wanted a time to have them tested.
No, I wanted time to have them make AIM come in and sit down. I want a time when the
Oh.
clock starts ticking.
I
That's
thought
all
we were
want.
talking about testing water
Yeah,
wells
that's-
here.
That's what I thought.
Well,
I'm
I
like
think
April
that
15th,
requesting
let's-
the testing isn't gonna hurt anything, with the understanding that if they're not willing to do it outside of a closure plan that's been approved, that maybe the town does it, to establish where this all sits before anybody
Who
starts
would we
doing that.
go to for that?
Main water quality.
Main water.
Well, we already test
No?
the wells around the landfill now. Rob Wadley, those houses are all tested.
Oh, really?
Yeah, every year.
Well, I guess we know who to go to then. Never mind. Disregard.
We have a closed landfill that has a closure plan.
Mm-hmm.
It has water quality monitoring. We get the reports every year. They do all that. As a matter of fact, our closure plan was amended this year to include PFAS testing and other things that were not formally required at the time that landfill was closed. I mean, even though the PFAS testing on our closed landfill is shown as very low, it's now required to be an ongoing
Perfect.
part of that. But
Who does that?
but the town has done a closure. It did the closure of its own landfill, and you pay almost $9,000 a year for engineers to do testing and do comparisons and run evaluations and provide the reports to the state and make sure that we're in compliance, nothing is leaching out that wasn't before, and wells aren't getting bad and all those kind of things. So it's the same process, and the process after is the same required process that
Required by the town or would it? would
required by the
AIM
state.
Right, but, so when this landfill's closed, right now, the town pays for the town one we had. But who would be?
Uh,
who would pay that?
There's a requirement for a minimum 30-year post-closure monitoring of a closed landfill. And if contaminants are continuing to rise or are they can extend that 30-year deadline. That's that. So the closure bond and the bond for making sure these things happen, that needs to be badly updated, is really important here, because if at some point someone decided they didn't want to do it anymore, there would be an obligation on the part of to make sure that all that work continued to get done.
Perfect, thank you.
How would we like to proceed? I will open it up for public comment if there is any here in just a moment, but I just want to get a general sense of, I'll say a couple of things. I don't know that every communication that goes back and forth between the DEP and the Bucksport Town Council needs to come from me. If it's the pleasure of the council for that to happen, certainly I'm
I
happy.
thought you did a great job.
I had a lot of help, but, okay, that's fine. I'm not trying to get out of it, I'm just saying that, so I'm happy to put that together. What is the timeline that we wanna discuss in terms of, if we're gonna own the water testing, I guess we can determine that, but if we're gonna request that the DEP do it,
Yeah, I think we requested
Yes.
DEP,
Request
does it.
DEP
Yes.
to do it.
Department of Environmental Protection.
Well, I think that it couched in the fact that you will be requiring this, and due to significant local concern about the current status of what's happened as a result of the non-compliance of the facility, that we're requesting that before the closure plan is approved, that water quality testing be done around in potentially affected wells around the site.
Do we
More
have-
than what is already tested, because some are already tested.
Yeah, I think, I was reading somewhere that, other, like, I think it was Sartell had to test like a mile away from the actual landfill site, but I don't know who would determine that, the water quality people, which wells, just the immediate abutters, or?
The people who look at where the groundwater is and which way it moves and all that, there are firms that have those maps and do that kind of work in order to determine, if there's no water moving in a certain direction,
No, point in testing,
there's no, there's a perception and there's a reality, and
Mhm.
perceptions is reality in many cases,
And
whether
it
it isn't
certainly
or it
needs to be
isn't.
managed, yep.
That's
Um,
right, but that if you were to ask for, that you're pleased to see that there's closure, but
But we remain concerned that it would be
it
highly.
remains concerned that there seems to be some difficulty in setting up a meeting with AIM that should be sooner rather than later, and that in anticipation even of that the water quality, I mean, they're out testing everywhere, everything for PFAS right now, trust me. There are people all over the place doing testing, so if you ask for that, and
I'm not necessarily the most patient person in the world sometimes with these things. So in terms of the timeline, though, it seems like it's not out of bounds for us to request that AIM, Bucksport Mill LLC, et cetera, have that. Would it be out of bounds to ask for that meeting to try to have before the end of April?
can ask for anything. I know that staff has been pushing for that,
Okay.
but
No one else has any concerns with that. I'll draft that up. Okay.
and then depending on the response, then maybe you do wanna meet with them before if they're not hurrying along
Right.
in any, I mean, not that the department doesn't have a lot on its plate right now, because it does, and I'm not suggesting that means this isn't important at all. I'm just saying that in the scope of environmental stuff going on in the state of Maine, they,
Totally agree. That said, if June 30th rolls around and we're still waiting,
oh, no.
that's a failure.
Well, then maybe we should ask for April 15th.
That's it.
That they,
I would ask that they make sure that the meeting happens in
30 days.
in April,
Yeah.
within 30 days,
Yeah.
yeah. That it's, well, we understand that there's a lot going on that for here,
Mhm.
this is a significant area of concern that needs attention, and that, some water quality testing to preface this, and a meeting with them after they've met with AIM, would be
I got a question. Could our representatives help guide it along? Yes, no, maybe, or are they too busy?
Well, I'm sure they advocate for us, or would tell DEP that they think we ought to do this.
We can also send this letter to them.
You can copy them.
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, this is worth a shot.
Yep. Anything else from the council? At the moment, anyway? Anyone from the public?
Good evening, councilors. My name's Ralph Chapman. I'm a resident of Bucksport, and I'm not a lawyer. And I say that because I wanted to read a few things to you. I'll take just a minute to read a couple of things. This is from the Department of Environmental Protection under Enforcement and Compliance. Quote, "The cornerstone of Maine DEP's compliance programs is our long-standing commitment to close monitoring and equitable enforcement of our laws. There's a proud tradition of taking our environmental laws seriously and an unwavering expectation from Maine people that we will enforce those laws. As a result, DEP maintains compliance programs that we understand rival any other in the country for consistency and for timely and appropriate responses to noncompliance." Unquote. From Maine statutes, Title I, Chapter 13, Subchapter 1, this subchapter may be known and cited as the Freedom of Access Act. Another sentence, this subchapter shall be liberally construed and applied to promote its underlying purposes and policies as contained in the Declaration of Legislative Intent. And the term public records means any written, printed, or graphic matter or any mechanical or electronic data compilation from which information can be obtained directly or after translation into a form susceptible of visual or oral comprehension that is in the possession or custody of an agency or public official of the state or any of its political subdivisions, or in its possession or custody of an association, the membership of which is composed exclusively of one or more of any of these entities, and has been received or prepared for use in connection with the transaction of public or governmental business, or contains information relating to the transaction of public or governmental business, except, and there are about 12 exceptions to that provision. And I was most struck by this portion of the commissioner's letter to you received yesterday. Department staff, quote, "Department staff have numerous communications with thousands of license holders by phone, virtual platforms, at meetings, and in passing about applicable statutes, rules, license provisions, and proposed activities. These communications are not typically recorded, transcribed, or formally noted in minutes." Now, as I mentioned, I'm not a lawyer, and so when I say that it looks to me as though this is a written admission of what seems to be a deliberate matter to keep away from the Freedom of Access Act, to me, that would be cause for, let me rephrase it slightly. I don't expect the council will want to do this, but I think it would be appropriate for the council to write to the governor and recommend the dismissal of the commissioner. Now, having said that, let's get to another process issue with the letter that you received yesterday, which has to do with this sentence. We had heard earlier that the reason for the extension was in consideration of the difficulties statewide with solid waste disposal, et cetera. That was in the Canuti letter. And this letter says something different. It says, "It would be inefficient use of department resources to review a closure plan only to have that immediately followed by a license transfer and amendment application. As a result, the department agreed to a limited time extension." So the purpose for the limited time extension was to avoid the inefficiency of department resources reviewing a closure plan, which they never received. So there was no opportunity for them to enter into that inefficiency. And the other process matter of concern in the letter that you received yesterday, as described above, the department expects that AIM will now continue planning for closure of the landfill. The department expects it. The department had ordered it, is my understanding. And then the department rescinded the order with no paperwork. And then the department has perhaps reinstituted the order with no paperwork. So it's not clear to me that the department is actually functioning. Now, that said, I fully support the commissioners, the counselors from writing a letter to the commissioner asking for the water testing, and not only for the water testing for neighboring water wells, but of major concern to me is the fact that we have leachate from the landfill, private landfill, illegally going directly into the Penobscot River. And I say illegally because the change was made from some treatment in the plant before it was torn down to no treatment, and that change the department knows about and was not, and is outside of the license parameters of the license for the landfill, is my understanding. Now, it seems to me that you are in a good position to ask the department to enforce compliance with the license. Now, they may not enforce compliance about closing the landfill because they seemingly ordered it and then has not ordered it and they have to order it again. But they could certainly, you could certainly ask them to enforce compliance with a license, which means they have to correct the problem of the leachate going into the river. And that's an immediate health problem for the entire region, it seems to me. Not only the problem of potential possible contamination of nearby wells of nearby residents, but a more regional problem with the leachate going to the river. Now, when it comes to monitoring that costs money, I know from past experience with the department that they, and I've mentioned this to you before, chose not to even follow a federal district court ordered consent decree to do monitoring of a mine site for the 5 years it was ordered. I do not expect that they will want to do any monitoring unless there is a sufficient degree of pressure put upon them to do so. So you're in a better position than individual citizens for putting that pressure on the department, and I highly support your efforts to do so. And I'm happy to try to address any questions you might have about my opinions on the matter. Thank you.
What else?
Don White, resident and taxpayer of Bucksport. We had a time limit at one point. We had a time of January 1st, 2024. We no longer have a expiration date at all. While I appreciate the sentiment in the commissioner's letter, and I think it's a step forward, I'm quite aware that we have taken a step back relative to an actual, let's do this. I think the idea of an expiration date is germane. I think it's appropriate. It was there once and was taken back at the bequest of AIM, who was apparently talking to an entity. Do we know who that entity is, by the way? Is it public information? I would think it would be appropriate to the meeting you talked about, Councilor Bishop, relative to after. I think a meeting before and perhaps even after is germane at this point. I think the DEP must understand clearly that there are serious issues up there that have been going on for a long period of time. There's holes in all their reports. there's holes. If you read it, there's some that didn't even happen, there's years, there's all kinds of holes, and DEP has not held them accountable. I think it would be appropriate for an in-person meeting with the town to happen as soon as possible, because you clarify some things. Letters are great, but they're back and forth things, and they leave things open to discussion, to misinterpretations, or whatever it is. So that's just a thought I have, that a meeting as soon as possible with DEP to lay out some concerns that the town has from its governing body and from its citizens is appropriate. The idea that DEP meets with tons of people and doesn't take minutes is surprising to me. And I only point that out because it affected our ability to figure out what happened. And we've written a letter through the mayor that's been now responded to, which I appreciate. But I think a heads-on meeting, asking them to come to Bucksport and talk to us is appropriate. And I think we need to think of nothing less than closure and moving on as possible. I'm sure that AIM's out there dancing right now with coming up with some, as the town managers pointed out, perhaps a square peg in a round hole. But they're not gonna, this is an asset for them. It's a possible moneymaker for them, but it's damaging to us. It's damaging to the town. It's possible, it's damaging to the river, it's damaging to the region, and it has been for a long time, and it serves no purpose. It serves no purpose at this point. And we need it closed, and we need it closed as soon as possible. And I think the DEP should understand some of that. I'm sure they do on one level, but I would ask that we get them here as soon as possible. Thank you.
Anyone else? Thank you, Doc. Anyone else? If there's no opposition, I'll draft a letter. That asks for water testing, asks for a timeline to be established for a conversation to be had with AIM, and for that conversation to be no later than April the 30th. That we would like to meet with them as soon as possible after that meeting to talk that through. I'd ask the council to consider that perhaps in that letter, we talk about a closure plan to be submitted from AIM no later than June the 30th. And then a closure date should be no later than December 31st, 2026, which is what was initially proposed. And if the Department of Environmental Protection or Bucksport Mill LLC can't meet either of those, I think it's intrinsic on them to tell us why. Hearing everything that has been said this evening from members of the public that have spoken, I think we should take that under advisement, especially if anything along the lines of what we've asked for, is including the dates, can't be met. If AIM can't get in a room with the DEP before the end of April, then I would like to perhaps consider a conversation to make sure that everyone is aware of the things that we've talked about ad nauseum, but make sure that they're not classified like that we're being as specific as possible, that yes, there's leachate going into the Penobscot River. It's not supposed to be doing that. And there are a lot of things that were supposed to have been done at that landfill that aren't. And as one person, and please, if there's anything here that you think is either too aggressive or not aggressive enough, I'm happy to have that conversation, but just as one person, I'm happy to observe the process, but to a point. I'm happy to observe the process, but at some point, you know, it is this body's job to, I think, advocate for its citizens. And I think we're doing the right thing now, but
I agree with you. It's a good plan, and our communication in letter and in writing is good documentation for us for documenting our process of where we're at with this.
yep.
Sue, how does that sound good to you? Okay.
I think that depending on the response, then you ask for a meeting sooner. You know, if there's gonna be some, then what Mayor Bissonnette is discussing is the meeting to discuss why, you know, you need to come talk to us about why it takes more than 30 days to set up a meeting with a licensee, et cetera, and do that. But I think in the interim, the continued request for action related to this and the water quality testing as a precursor to a closure plan is water quality testing has to be done as part of it anyway, and they need a baseline. So to help us understand and residents who are concerned, it's a good faith effort to work towards closure if they agree to do that monitoring ahead of time.
In the letter, it says, as described above, the department expects that AIM will now continue planning for closure of the landfill. So in saying that, if they're continuing something, they've already started it, right? What access or level access do we have to whatever closure planning that they've started?
I think the only closure planning that's been started is a request for them to do it. I don't think they've actually physically, I think they got the first letter, but I don't.
2023 indicating they needed to come up with a plan.
The letter that said you've got some more time didn't say you don't still have to do it. It says you've got some more time before you have to do it. But I don't think there's any active closure planning.
Nope.
At this point.
Just didn't know if that was something we should be requesting to see, since it's written in the letter.
Well, certainly we've requested to see anything that comes in regard to that is, I have to say this, and I don't mean, I talk to people all day long, every day, and I don't write down everything that I say to somebody who's got a building permit or who's got a question about their taxes, or I don't. It's not possible to do that. And if somebody calls up and says, can I blah, 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 it doesn't necessarily get written down, and I don't think the department is materially different, because they do have thousands of licensees, and there are things from serious to just nothings that people ask about. I think that the truth is somewhere in the middle in this, but, you know, respectfully, Melanie Loism is a good commissioner. I would not be requesting her dismissal by the governor. She is not the enemy of this community, and I would strongly recommend that you don't head down that path. I've worked with numerous commissioners, and Ms. Loism is one of the good ones. Because this didn't start with her.
Well, thank you for that?
Hopefully it'll
I-
finish with her.
Yeah, well, if she's put it in writing,
No,
I believe that,
I think that's what I mean. I think it will finish.
Anything else from the council on this?
No, I think that's great.
Perfect. All right. If I have any questions as I drafting, I'll communicate.
Thank you.
Thanks. As mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, the conversation about Habitat for Humanity is not occurring this evening. So the next item is the American Legion has a request for discontinuance of a sewer bill.
it's the wrong word. Their letter does not use the word discontinuance. Their letter, includes the word curtailment.
Okay.
And, when I used discontinuance, it was, cause it was a more commonly known word than curtailment, but the idea was that they didn't say they never wanted to pay a sewer bill again. The idea of stopping it while they're in the process of, working to rehabilitate and get the lodge into a functional situation again is what they were requesting. There's a number of their members here this evening that I think can explain their request to you, but I just wanted to explain the word that I used as opposed to, it didn't mean they said they didn't ever want to pay one. It was that they wanted to do that, so. Yeah.
Thank you for the clarification. Let me just slide. I do, as the town manager said, we do have folks from the American Legion here this evening. Any of you like to speak?
Good evening. Vince Crescenziano, Verona Island, not a resident, but I am a member of American Legion Post 93. The bottom line is we're just seeking relief from the service so that we can concentrate on some building maintenance. We don't fully utilize the service. The kitchen isn't functional. The bathroom's only used once a month, 5 months out of the year, so 5 days. We're seeking some relief while we concentrate on the building. That's what we're looking for. Thank you.
Absolutely.
I wanna make a motion. I wanna make a motion to grant the relief.
Second.
Questions?
We need to talk about our obligation to others if they came to us with the same request, what the ripple effect could be as far as our commitment for our obligations for the sewer. We have a, what's the term I'm looking for, Sue? A debt service to pay, is that correct? On the sewer that each address or each meter, what's the best way to relay that, is committed to.
$45 of each sewer bill that goes out goes towards debt service on the system. And so for people who have discontinued water or torn down a building, but their site is still has a service, we changed this a number of years ago because those people were all paying the full freight for minimum. We changed that to, for those who did that, to a $45 a quarter for the purpose of meeting debt service, because every connection has that responsibility. And that's what we did in that case. To the best of my knowledge, we don't have any other nonprofits that are in that status in terms of the $45 a quarter. And I'm not being negative on this. I'm the one that has to say to the next person through the door, yes, you can, no, you can't.
Right.
And so,
And I wanna find a way to do it, but I wanna do it if we have to go through a couple of hoops. I wanna make sure we go through the right ones to make sure that it's done appropriately.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong with this, but I mean, this is a nonprofit organization that's trying to get back on their feet.
Yes.
Okay, the American Legion is it's been around forever, but it's an organization that the young ones that can join it just aren't, they're not joining it yet, right? And it's an aging thing, I mean, and if we can give them relief to help them try to build,
Absolutely.
it's just,
What
I
if you?
agree with you. I just worry about an arbitrary system.
So is there a way for us to take care of a portion, everything but the debt service, and then we make those two separate items so that we're very clear of how we help that process? Because I very much so want to buy them time if they're going to reboot and reconfigure.
So I think you brought up an excellent point. I mean, we're not fully functional. At the very least, let's see that request put us in a position where we're not paying for a fully functional facility. And if you're looking for the American War veterans to pay debt, I'll come up with $45 a quarter.
I'm not looking for that. We're trying to come up with a way
I
to
know.
make it
I know.
happen.
That is, allows us
I know what you're saying.
to have the same, the,
Process moving forward, if it lands on your desk again,
well, if.
how do we
if,
have a process for that?
One of the churches is having financial difficulties. There's any number of nonprofits that could have, that have bricks and mortar that could. What if you considered, giving them a year, just curtailing for, and then and take a look at it again in a year to see where they got and what it isn't saying. It defines a period of time, it has identified a need, but it doesn't say,
It doesn't open any doors for anyone
no,
to take
it
advantage
says
of it.
this, for the next 4 quarters, that will
Okay,
do that, and then, because truthfully, you should have some idea within a year if it's gonna live or die. I'm not trying to be crude, but within a year, you should have an idea if things are gonna be on a path that's gonna get you where you wanna go. Does that sound,
More than reasonable.
very good.
that gives them
Right.
time,
Yep.
a defined time, 1 year, it's, certainly there's been enough remarks that could show differentiation from, as this for others, and the equivalent of 4 quarters at $45 is not a significant loss in terms of funding that couldn't be made up. Is that?
Sounds good.
I struggle with equity, that's all. I think I
I
wish.
can solve that. My next 4 meetings will pay for the 4 quarters. I just wanna give them a chance,
Well,
and I am a veteran, so I'll take care of that, and that will give them a chance.
I really think that it's cleaner if you just, because then it's, when someone else comes in, you don't give them, that, I think that saying that we're gonna not bill a Legion for 4 quarters is a cleaner way to do it than someone else making up, because then the next request, I can rationalize in a sane way to someone who came in why the council made this decision and why it's unlikely there's anyone else in Bucksport that would be in this situation. Because they're not the same organization, they don't have the same history, the town doesn't own the land next door, I got 100 things, but it's also got a box around it. And I think that if we start using Counselor Page to do these things, that it's, then we've got an equity issue, because then if somebody else wants
I
to do it.
understand that.
Yes.
I wanted to avoid anyone coming in after and said, you did it for them, do it for me, tell me why. I just need an answer.
I got
That's
the
it.
why.
That's all I want.
Yeah.
And veterans is a good enough answer for me, but I'm saying, take the emotion out of it. I pushed the broom around the American Legion as a kid when my grandfather was there all the time. That's a separate story. Now that we're here, I wanna make sure that we have the money we need to pay our bills and people don't have a way to skirt that. That's it.
The 200 or whatever $45 is done, less than $200 that we're talking about is not gonna impact our ability to pay our debt service. It gives the organization a year to come up with a plan and a path
All right.
forward, and then the council can decide then where things go. Maybe if this path forward is working, maybe they move to paying the $45 a quarter while they're continuing to, that, this way the town isn't saying it's, we don't
No, I-
recognize it, we're saying that
I
this
understand,
1
I
year
understand
period
what
is
you
that.
mean. I truly do.
I'm not,
I totally.
No, these are the things we have to,
Yeah.
I mean, I can
I
see, I
understand.
think I know where Councilor Harris is
I
coming from.
am, so I support the
conversation was
ask,
good.
and I'm
Yep.
just trying to think, another nonprofit runs into some infrastructure issues that's important to a lot of people as well, and how do we handle that? And so I was just trying to see if there can be a system where everyone has equitable access to a grace period, if they're a nonprofit doing really important stuff. And how do we decide as a council body that's representing 5,000 people what's important? And so I support it. I want to be really clear about that. I just like to have systems that everybody can access in the same, the same equal access for all nonprofits.
Yeah, I mean,
or
correct me if I'm wrong, so if they applied for, don't we have that when it comes to budget years, we give to nonprofits, and we
Yeah.
distribute, I mean, this year, if I read correctly, quite a bit of money.
there, yes, we do,
So
we do.
it's kind of the same, they just came in a different way.
If the Legion had applied for community agency funding,
Right.
they could have applied.
Yeah, okay. I mean, it's kind of like that, just in a
Yeah,
a
they
different,
had
just in a
equal
different
access to
package,
apply,
package,
yeah.
yeah.
And
Okay.
many of our other nonprofits access funding through that mechanism.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. We have a motion in a second.
Do you have a motion in a second?
Do I have to amend it for a year from today? So I'll amend my motion, but use from
The next 4
quarters, next four
because they've
four
already,
billings.
they're current, so
They're correct, so
the
the next 4 billings.
Yes.
It's been moved to amend that, and you were the second on the original, right? You, I'm sorry, Dan, would you second?
Second.
All right, moving second, questions? Thank you for the conversation. I know sometimes the process of making the sausage, how's that old saying go? But I'd rather have the conversation now and have it over and done with. All's in favor? Opposed? Thank you. Thank you. Under agenda items, we have what's listed on the original agenda. We also have a couple of items that came in late that I will ask for approval to consider. They came in from Mr. Rotella around for us to consider both additional floats as well as lighting at recreation. Are we okay with those items being added to the agenda? We need to have an actual motion on
you have to have a motion
I'll have
to
a
set
motion.
aside the rule.
Motion. Second.
Second, all those in favor? Opposed? opposed, thank you. But the first item on the agenda is resolved 2024-42 to approve use of public safety building funds for kitchen renovations at the public safety building.
Motion approved.
Second.
So moved and seconded. Questions? Or do you have anything to add either?
The cost is primarily for materials. Staff will be doing it, other than the drop ceiling and electrical work that's necessary, because we need licensed people to do that. Our Deputy Fire Chief and Public Safety Director are here. If you have any questions, this kitchen hasn't been updated other than the countertops since the building was put in place in 1967.
Deputy Chief, is there gonna be an open house? I've been to some firefighters' food, dinners, so. We can certainly do that. I mean, those firefighters know how to eat.
Any other questions, comments, concerns? We have a motion and a second. Great. All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. Next is, like I said, there's a conversation about additional lighting, et cetera, at the basketball, volleyball, and courts and the ice rink. Mr. Ravel, if you'd like to speak to any of that?
Yes, simply asking for the basketball courts this evening. Many of the recreational facilities we have are now at subpar standards. Lighting, all the infrastructure is starting to fail because there's no infrastructure needs. So I'd like to start small with the basketball courts. It's one of the heavier used areas, and what's happening right now are kids are using their headlights. And when you have headlights and you're going head on, there are poles that these basketball hoops are attached to, and I can just see someone running head on like Wile E. Coyote and just dropping. So these are the original sodium halide lights. When the one light turns on, it starts out green, and in all seriousness, if you wait 7 to 10 minutes, it then gets to the dimming power. So we have a box outside on the pole right now that is exposed to the elements. Anybody can go in, turn it on, turn it off. That's not safe. We put it on a timer system like all of our other facilities that the YMCA would have access to. It's on from X to Y, and it's shut off. It does not have to be policed or anything. And I think this company is actually doing work at the schools right now, so they're there. I think it's more than fair. And the other two quotes are just for later on. We'll at least have a starting point. Simply asking for basketball tonight, though, please.
Okay.
Motion approved.
Second.
Questions? All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. And then the second additional item, Rich, I'll probably ask you to come right back. Talk to us about the float or floats.
The floats were originally presented to you in February of 2022. We had 3 sets of items that we were looking to accomplish. Complete the 29 floats so that every float in the marina would be less than 24 years old at that time. They're now going on year number 26. There were anchors that were needed, which we found out during that storm that blew through Bucksport and took out our sea docks. Those were purchased and taken care of. And the third item was to add some new docks for a mini expansion. That's been wiped out at this point. What needs to be done, which is necessary, are those docks that are now going on year number 26. As we took out one of the 40-foot by 4-foot floats last year from the crane over the river, not next to anyone that could get hurt, it fell apart in the air. They are no longer safe. We have a full house and we have 2 pages worth of people looking to come here. We cannot be down floats, and we can't operate efficiently for our customers or for the town. Now, the quotes that came in, we had 4 bids, 2 of which came in well over $300,000. The other 2 bids were separated by slightly over $10,000, but the cost from the time when I originally did the bids is up $9 a square foot, and that's that's byproduct of the economy we live in today.
Oh, yeah, there's not much where the price hasn't increased over the last couple of years, you're right.
I just had
Please, no.
I know you suggested the lowest bid. Why are they so vastly different, the highest bid to the lowest bid? Are we,
One of the bids charged for delivery.
oh, okay.
It was my request that at a minimum one was built prior to the floats going in at the end of April.
Yeah.
But really wanted 8 of them done so that all the 40-foot float sections. My concern is 40 by 4 is a lot of potential instability.
Yeah.
So what we're looking at now is supply issues. Gardner always bids on our projects.
Oh, okay.
Gardner, 99% of the time, is our lowest.
So we're not cutting corners by taking the lowest one. I guess that's
We're
what I was
not.
getting at. Are we still
Yes.
getting what we want and need?
We are.
Yeah.
They actually built the last set, and when the storm ripped through, they actually built the emergency ones over July 4th for us. They had them done in 2 days. It was a lot easier to get the tubs at that point. The tubs right now, we were speaking off here earlier, about 4 to 5 weeks out. So the reason bringing it now and asking is so that they can get that headway to try to get them here. We open May 15th, so that still gives us time and them time as well. And they can go locally to Vikings, if they're listening, and grab what they need to build that first one in time, so.
Any other questions? Sue, you?
I would ask, the only thing I would ask, because this is significantly more, and this is a 25-year investment, you have to bond the 2 culvert projects that were completed, that were approved by the public, for Jacob Buck and Bucks Mills. You have to bond those. I would ask that you combine this expenditure with that, to not spend funds that they're not budgeted operating funds, they're just a direct hit to fund balance, and for a 25-year investment, that's not the best way to use your available cash. It doesn't mean that they can't move forward, it means that when we do the bond for the cost of this would be added on to that as well, because you have some significant expenditures. You also have the walls that you're continuing to do, and I would caution against spending down fund balance when we have the potential project, the 9010 one, and some other ones coming up that are looking to obligate those monies.
We also have Central Street.
And
starting up here
Central
shortly as
Street's
well.
another one. So I think that it's, this is a 25-year expenditure. This isn't a 1-year expenditure. And there were not funds ever set aside for anything in regard to the marina, because the town, prior to this obligation of funds to the marina, didn't use taxpayer dollars on it.
The initial request was to have it come out of ARPA, and at that point, it was the council at that point who suggested that that wouldn't be an appropriate use of funds. So it came back 2 weeks later, and instead of going through the loan process as we did with the first set, knowing that without going exorbitant on rates and probably pricing us out of business, would be best to have it come out of fund balance. So I think the bond is a smart financial decision on the town's behalf, and having the project go forward and keeping the revenue line of the marina active as well.
Questions, comments? How would the council like to proceed?
Do we need to make that part of a motion for the bond? Motion to approve and adding it to the bond we're gonna do for the 2 culverts.
Second.
Make sure there are no questions. All those in favor? Opposed?
Thank you.
Thank you, Rich. Next is, I'm getting ahead of myself. Next is resignations, appointments, assignments, and elections. Earlier this evening, the Services Committee met. And the appointments that are before us this evening, make sure I have the right, thank you. I'll go down through these as quickly as possible. We have for code enforcement officer, plumbing inspector, health officer, building official, and street naming and numbering coordinator. These are all one-year terms for Luke Chiavelli. We have tax assessor and plumbing inspector, Caitlin Eldridge. The tax assessor is a 2-year term, plumbing inspector 1. Harbor master Mike Ormsby, a 1-year term. Deputy harbor master Jessica Ormsby, also a 1-year term. Board of Assessment Review Jacob Grandmason for a 3-year term. Zoning Board of Appeals Don White for a 5-year term. Planning Board Mark Ness-Lucen, also a 5-year term. On the Conservation Commission, we have John Christopher, Linda Plord, Candace Spalding, and Karen Johnson, all 3-year terms. The Parks and Parks and Recreation Committee, Richard Rotella for a 3-year term. And last, but certainly not least, Cemetery Committee, we have Mark Eastman, Larry Wall, Christopher Johnson, Linda Moore, and Stephen St. Peter, all for 1-year terms. If there are no questions, how would the council like to proceed?
Motion approved?
Second.
And seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. The next item is approval of quitclaims, discharges, and deeds, of which there are none. Town manager report.
Attached to your report tonight is a copy of a letter of support that I wrote for the robotics team for a project that they are working on. The team is having another amazing year and has placed first in the 2 competitions in which it has participated thus far. At this time, they are ranked 1st in New England, 3rd in the United States, and 5th in the world. In addition to winning competitions, the team is also qualified to compete for the Engineering Inspiration Award, which is the project that required the letter of support. On a positive note, I have an update on 45 Pond Street. Because the property has been vacant for more than 10 years and we had no address to contact the owner, and although USDA signed for the letter that we sent saying you have 30 days to pay, they never contacted us. And we never have a time in a foreclosure that we can't find somebody to get an affirmative answer for. So I reached out to a contact that I have at USDA in Bangor and asked who I could talk to in the organization and where I could find them about this property, and spelled out sort of what we were doing, and I was thrilled. She immediately forwarded my email to their foreclosure division in the Midwest. The person within hours contacted me and said that in writing that USDA has no further legal interest in this property and has no intention of paying any bills, and further went on to tell me that once the town sold it, they would send a discharge deed to the new owner that could be recorded at the registry, which eliminates that mortgage from sitting on that property if someone buys it, which is significant because generally speaking, if there's anything sitting on a property, it's somewhat like we went through with the 5 Mount Olive Heights and that $32,000 penalty that took us 2.5 years to get gone. This is my one victory this week.
That's awesome.
It feels like something positive happened as a result of a little extra effort to make sure that what we were selling to someone had the best possible chance at getting a clear deed and financing and that kind of thing. So tax due date falls on a Sunday this year, so anyone paying in person on Monday will not be charged interest, and we also take postmarks for payments sent before the 1st. I submitted the grant application for our courtesy boat inspection program, and we should know in the next few weeks if we are awarded funding again this year. We have a coordinator and several volunteers ready to operate the program, and Maine Water is partnering with the town in this annual project as well. They contribute $1,500 a year towards the cost of the program. And finally, I would like to request that we start the budget review meetings on April 11th instead of April 4th. I am still waiting for some budget information, and I will not have your books ready for you until the end of this coming week. We could move the Public Works budget to the April 25th or May 9th meetings, and then the schedule would still remain intact and be on track to complete at the time that we wanted to. I gave you a copy of the budget with where I would put it if it were my choice, which would be May 9th.
So moved.
But I was gonna say, it's totally up to you. If you say I can't, I don't know what I'm gonna do, because if I don't have numbers, I don't have numbers, so that's.
Any objection to that? I know some of us have reacted. Alrighty. There's that. Thank you, Sue. I'm sure it's not your only victory this week, but good job on that.
But it was one I could touch. It was
There
in
you
an
go.
email.
It's tangible. Yeah, all right. It was a tangible victory.
It was a tangible
All right. Thank you. Let's see. Next is set public hearings and or hold public hearings and approval of any licenses or permits. We only have a CMP hold permit on Bucks Mills Road. Any questions? Will the council like to proceed?
Motion to approve?
Second.
Second, all those in favor? Opposed? Discussion of items not on the agenda for the council of the public. We'll start with the public this evening. Well, we got that out of the way. Anyone on the council?
I've got one for us.
Thanks, Steve.
Yep. Rick, can I have your help with the computer? You wanna be my tech guy?
Yeah, I got to do something today, Steve.
Alright. So, topic, animal shelter. We've been kicking this around for a couple of years now, back and forth, and I came up with an option, an idea that some of us have put some time into over the last couple of weeks, looking at the pros and cons, what could or couldn't be. I've just been trying to do some research, figuring out if it was worth bringing to everybody or not, to see if this idea had any teeth at all. I was hoping Luke would be here tonight so we could shed some light on some numbers, but I know that the least expensive animal shelter option was $650,000 from one that he emailed me the other day. And I think we'd all agree the reason why this isn't done yet is because it costs so much money. And there's been a lot of different ideas on where it should go, where it shouldn't go. Pretty much nobody wants it next to them, and no one wants to spend that kind of money on it. So I'll show you a Google Images version of my thought process here when my tech guy gets things rolling.
Oh, where's mine?
Oh, look at that.
This makes Rich tall.
Yeah.
It's because everything I need is at eye level today.
You weren't even gonna give me the chance to give you any grief.
Nope.
Peter got to sit here for years and get, never mind.
Is it 386? 368?
Somewhere in that vicinity.
We'll find out really
I
what
bet you're right.
But it is. Nope,
No.
not right.
That's Glenn's.
Yeah.
Close, across the road.
I must have the night. You know
But if you go to it, you.
I can go to it, that'll be closer. Easy with touchscreen.
I want one of those.
Alright. Where is he in relation?
Glenn is right across the road. You don't have a Google, like a, does that?
Oh, I will, yeah.
version?
There you go.
Perfect.
Oh, is that it right there?
Yep.
No.
Would you look at that?
That's why I hired you.
That's what I drove down, right?
Okay, my thought is, we have our town garage, our public works facility is located here. We had talked about putting it behind the animal shelter, behind this building in the field. Obviously, due to cost, we haven't done that yet. This building here out front is Jay's office, our highway foreman's office, and he uses, what's a fair number, 20-30% of that building. The rest of it remains vacant. We already own it, it already exists. It would be very possible for us to have our crew park their vehicles out back behind the town garage. Jay could move back into the main portion of the building with his administrative duties and do a new office. And we could rip up this pavement around this area, we could completely fence this whole scenario in, work with other logistics. It would be up to Sean and David and our animal control and everyone else to figure out what they would wanna do. But that area could be reconfigured in a way that would facilitate our animal shelter for hundreds of thousands of dollars less than anything else that's come across our desk this far. There's pros and cons with the infrastructure that is and isn't available there. There's a well that belongs to the town garage here that we could finish running for water supply. This building was plumbed and prepared for water, but it was never finished. The dots were never connected to make this building as functional as it was supposed to be. As far as sewer or septic, the sewer system is 200 feet-ish down the road. That is an option, but it may be more cost-effective just to do a separate holding tank and schedule its pumping next to the building. Several options for some of these logistics, how they get worked out, but my mind sees us, instead of going with $1 million plus on a referendum item, or even at the 650, setting a budget for the infrastructure that's proposed and tweaking it so it meets our needs of the program and size that we currently have.
How many square feet is that building?
768, is that what we figured out the other night?
Yeah.
What's that?
I think if you hit CAI property card, one of the two property cards, it'll tell you the size. Just bring it up.
Chief Winchester, how?
Oh, we have it listed as 0.
0.
Here.
If you had to guess how much larger that building is than our current one, what would you say?
At least two times, maybe
Okay.
3.
Okay.
I mean, if you combine the square footage.
Should be
of
on the
the
next
building,
page, Rich. There you go.
The cat building out there is essentially a closet.
And there's a newer shed that was built, that was bought to go out there, correct? That's the cat building? Is that the newer shed that Sue was talking about?
Say that again, Steve.
There's a newer shed out there. Is that the cat building that you're talking about? So it would be possible for us to maybe move that up there and configure that somehow for some of the isolation scenarios and things like that, so we're not wasting anything. Like I said, the logistics are really, it's your department, you guys run that. It's just, this is something that's been talked about and kicked around for quite a while, and I wanted to float the idea to see if anybody was interested in pursuing it. A major, I say contingent on it, that we had talked about before and we were willing to put the money and effort into, would be the soundproof barrier, or that sound fencing around a shelter that would be built. And I think with respect to the neighbors and the abutters, one's here tonight, I called him, I talked to him earlier, and the other one, we had really good conversations about it and some of the challenges that could be presented. But it would be important that we really emphasize that sound barrier fencing for this type of scenario.
Which was going to be, no matter where you did it, was going to be necessary, whether it stayed in its current location, and got a slab and a rebuild and all that, it also required that fencing, and any other location that we've discussed it for, we've said it would need that kind of sound barrier fencing.
There's probably some sound deadening you can do inside the building as well, isn't there?
Yeah,
In the
Yeah.
kennels or whatever.
it's actually better for the animals too to have that.
They don't have the reverberation.
Yeah.
I think tweaking this building, it would be a lot faster and a lot more cost-effective for us. We could have local contractors put their hands on these things. We could put it out to bid. I don't know where the oversight of the project would be. That would be up to Sue to see if that was a Luke thing or how that fell with some of these details. But I feel like we'd have a lot more and faster control over the logistics, not going with a new construction $1 million new building. I feel like this is actually a possible option.
So are you asking for, to be
Uh,
referred to an infrastructure
So
committee?
next would have to go to infrastructure if anybody thought it was a good idea. I thought it was important to talk to the people that we've had conversations with so far and get it to this point and have a discussion, so we're not wasting a lot of time on this if this is a bad idea.
Nope, I'm
I
supporting
think,
moving
it-
it.
I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, I think it's definitely worth looking into.
Yep. I am too. The only question I've had a brief conversation with you about this, and I know you and Councilor Eastman have, were out here, and I would normally say that that's good enough for me, but I also wanted, has there been any conversation with the employees at the town garage about any of this at all?
There has.
I'm just curious as to what that conversation has been.
I had a conversation with them with Rich, when we were looking for information and research, and the Public Works Director, who is currently in that building, was phenomenal about the idea. He said, yeah, sure, if that makes sense, if that's what you guys wanna do, then that's fine, we'll build an office in here and find the space, and that'll be that. It was,
I
No
think,
big deal.
I went out the other day and looked at it, and Councilor Bishop had mentioned the tanks that are there, that there's a potential to relocate those as well and create more yard space.
we had spoke with Jay about that,
Oh.
and that's just a big question mark, cause there's so many different things in the works, and so many different goals and parts of buildings and things that are beyond me, but he seemed to think that it was very possible to move those, the fuel pumps. I don't know if we can find it.
But just out of,
Just to the left of the blue. What do you wanna go back to? You wanna go back to your map?
Wanted to show where the pumps were.
You'll wanna,
I guess it's possible from what he
those
was.
are right there.
So right now, the buses, the trucks, everything fuels and comes in around here and does a big loop in a large
No,
circle.
sometimes they go the other way.
Which wasn't right, depends on what side the fuel door is on, and there's no way to make it one way in, one way out, but, I haven't researched it, I don't know, he said it was possible, and they were talking about moving some other things out to the back, so there'd be more options for some things in the future, and I know, Chief Kagan had some serious reservations, about those pumps being there, and jump in anytime you want, but this is the first time I brought this idea up publicly, cause it seems to be getting a little bit of teeth with the scenario where it would save us hundreds of thousands of dollars to use this way.
It's in a more accessible location.
And that's something that was discussed in the past, where people had said, why don't you put it on town land way out back, out on Route 46, where nobody would hear anything and be out of the way, and that's just not a responsible decision for public safety, for the animal control officer to be out there alone, winter time, the travel. And a lot of the volunteers and people of the public wanted it close and accessible so they could actually get there. Its
Well,
its
and what-
current location has a gate and, has presented its own problems with the transfer station and the gate not being locked and things like that.
and one thing here, they could walk dogs in behind, so at least there'd be the opportunity where they can't presently.
Yeah. Yeah, the fence line goes right into the back where the trails are.
They currently exercise the animals behind the town garage in that field area now on occasion as well.
Yeah.
Cause that goes to the trails.
Yes.
Yep.
Any questions or comments from public?
Not in favor of it. This is my front yard, my front lawn, and I don't wanna see these dogs back. And obviously, the reason why we're moving them is because Silver Lake Estates does not want to listen to them either. This is where this is coming from, this is why we're moving it, and I'm not in favor of it. We're right across the street from Public Works Department.
Yep, he's directly across.
So putting back the dogs in my front yard, I'm not in favor of it. That's all.
Just a pleasure of the council. I,
Good neighbors, they don't bother, I mean, the plow truck just helps them, and get used to it. It's part of what we do. But putting puppy dog kind of in front driveway,
I think Mr. Terry's concerns duly noted, and I don't blame him at all. I do think that if it is the council's pleasure to move this to the infrastructure committee for review and consideration, as we've discussed before in the past, the noise remediation needs to be a priority. If we are going to proceed down this road, the end goal should be that the abutters to this property are able to say, we don't hear, there's not an impact to my lifestyle or anything as a result of this change.
And I think we talked before, I've read some stuff where they put them next to yacht clubs where they've been able to deaden the noise enough, but we need somebody that has a little more knowledge of that.
Exactly, yep.
That's a big concern, that's a concern of mine too. But it sounds like anywhere, obviously you were talking about it before I came on, so, but it sounds like you were talking about it before, where this is, you know, the noise coming out of here is a priority. I mean, that's a big issue where it is, where the last place that it was talked about, I'm guessing that's why the price was up around $1.1 million. I'm guessing.
What was the reason?
Something to do with the sound and
that was
the
certainly
building.
part of it.
Right. I mean, that's it. You know,
It was $625 a square foot for new construction.
yeah.
That was the.
Okay. That's a
But
lot.
I will say that in its current location, under the new animal control officer, that the number of complaints about noise has dropped to virtually zero. Even Mr. Hawes was in to say that they hadn't noticed since I don't know what she's done to change operations, but it has resulted in a quieter for the neighborhood.
There was a hound dog out there for a long time, over a year. And hound dogs, they don't bark, they pound. Very loud.
Crying all the time.
Nice. Very well done, sir.
Sorry, I had to go there. I said they crying all the time.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that dog is now gone, so it has quieted.
But still, we could get another one back even for a period of time, and I think Mr. Terry's concerns are
Absolutely.
are ones that we need, that in the past we have talked about quite a bit, and I think we still need to in this case too. This is two things. This is an example of something that we've already identified as something that we perhaps kicked down the road for a while, and this is at least a start to perhaps resolving that. And I would, challenge everyone to be open-minded, but also look out for themselves too. I don't blame you a bit. It very well could be, but yep, we can bring
In
it up.
fact, you're just gonna go on the inside of Subway Stage, you're not getting away from a lot of people's issue.
Okay. Again, I think
Or
we
go down behind the transfer station, you can find them, but with the sound getting in fences and so forth, maybe you can still work there.
again, let's consider that. Steve, Mr. Deputy Mayor, thank you. This is at least a suggestion that is, at least gives us something to talk about and stop kicking the proverbial can, so.
That's affordable.
Yep. Any other questions, comments, concerns? At least, because really all that we're asking right now is that it goes to the.
To infrastructure.
The infrastructure committee for consideration, okay. So we'll need to. Okay, anything else not on the agenda from anyone on the council?
Yes. So I just wanted to bring up that Julie Sebos was just hired as the director of the Child Care Center. I know they've had some Facebook press recently that's hasn't been wonderful, but I went up and met with Julie and talked some about some of the things that she wants to do with it. I'm excited for it. I think that she's going to do a really good job, and I'm looking forward to the future, what they can do.
Wonderful. That's good news. Do you know her from?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Excellent. No, that's good to hear. Thank you. Yep. Anyone else? All right. Upcoming public hearings, designation of topics for committee assignment, we've already kind of done that, and scheduling of committee meetings. Obviously, we need to have an infrastructure committee meeting at some point. How much time do we need to prepare for? Do we want to do that before the next meeting?
We could do it at 6 on the 11th.
Is that enough time for, I mean, obviously Luke's gonna have to get some numbers run, and is that enough time for him to run some numbers and make some phone calls and do a little bit of research for?
Maybe the second council meeting
Yeah.
in April.
So that would be
Yeah,
the
'cause
25th?
I won't be here on the
The second
11th.
one's the
Okay.
25th, right?
Yep.
So the 25th, April 25th, that's the only one we've got right now.
Okay. Do we have a budget meeting before that one? Yes, of course we do. So we would do,
We have one that night, but it's during the meeting.
oh,
not
gotcha.
before.
So we could do
So we could do 6 PM.
6 PM on the 25th?
Mm-hmm. I would also probably just advise that there may be multiple meetings on this before it goes to the council. Maybe not, but I don't think anybody should be surprised if there are a couple meetings on that.
Speaking of scheduling, I had previously indicated I'd be away on the 4th, but that's changed to the 11th. It doesn't impact this. 'Cause
Okay.
it's on the 25th, but just letting you know.
Thank you.
I will be here on the 4th.
You will be here on the 4th, all right.
We don't have a meeting.
We don't
We
have a
don't
meeting
have
on
it,
the
we
4th.
changed.
I
Change
know.
that.
Gotcha.
So I guess you won't be,
I know.
or you're gonna be here by
know.
yourself.
But if there was a
But if
meeting-
something comes
there
up,
was a
Tracy's here.
meeting, I would be
Yep.
here.
That's right.
Thank you.
Just mark that down.
I do have a question on the 11th. We don't have anything before?
No, the budget meeting.
Just the budget meeting?
Yep.
Just the council.
Or a regular council meeting with a budget meeting?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yep.
No, that's perfect.
Which is public safety.
I can't wait for that one.
I knew you'd be excited.
If there's nothing else, the last item on the agenda is adjournment.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion and second, all those in favor? Thank you, everyone. Another good